All right. So, Hellboy 2019 was an unmitigated disaster. Wouldn't you say, Lewis?
Yeah.
I liked the movie. I did. I really liked it. I went into that movie thinking this is going to suck. And I walked out going, I want to see a lot more of this.
Financially a disaster.
Financially, I mean, even critically speaking, like the reviewers were just like tearing into it,
They you can't really. That's where you got.
You can't trust Rotten Tomatoes, man. No, and that's true. You really can't. That is true. But David Harbour has actually been kind of talking a bit more about this. We're a year almost to the release of the film originally, and I think it made like very little money in this first weekend. But David Harbour is coming out now, and he's saying what he thinks is the reason why it failed, and not because of all the production problems on the movie, of which there were plenty of production problems. But according to him, it says that he thinks it failed because angry fans of Guillermo Del Toro's movie are what derailed it. And here's the thing. I don't disagree with that sentiment at all. I really don't. Because people have been waiting from 2008, to 2018, really, for 10 years to get Hellboy 3. And with Ron Perlman and Selma Blair and Guillermo coming back into it with, Doug Jones and everything. And no matter how many times Guillermo tried to get it off the ground, he couldn't. And so I do think that played a bit into why this movie kind of failed. But let's take a look here at what's going on. So over on Instagram via Screen Rant, Harbour opened up about the film's failure, saying, I think it failed before we began shooting because I think people didn't want us to make the movie. And for some reason, there was like a big Guillermo Del Toro and Ron Perlman created this iconic thing that we thought we could be reinvented. And then the loudest on the internet was like, we do not want you to touch this. And then we made a movie that I think is fun and I think had its problems, but it was a fun movie. And then people were just very, very against it. And that's people's rights. But I learned my lesson in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, I get what he's saying there. You get what he's saying there, right?
Yeah, I feel bad for him.
I do feel bad. I think he got a lot of crap on that one there. And of course, they do talk about how the movie did not do very well. But even the other movies didn't do very well here. 2004's Hellboy only earned $99 million on a budget of $66 million, which wasn't much. Mm-hmm. Hellboy 2 drew in $160, which is considerably more, on an $85 million budget. But at the end of the day, I mean, they just didn't carry it enough to making a third movie. And while I do think that Guillermo should have made his third film, I want that abundantly clear. I want to see what happened with the twins and with Selma Blair. At this point, it is quite literally impossible to do. Not only is Ron Perlman much older now, 12 years older from when they shot it, Selma Blair has got, I think she's got multiple sclerosis.
Oh no!
And she's like, I don't know. I think she's retiring from acting, or she is on her way out the door on that front. So they couldn't go make this movie anyway. And remember, even Guillermo, like this is what I don't get. Coming off of The Shape of Water, right, where he had pitched the Creature of the Black Lagoon movie to Universal, they turned him down. So he went and made The Shape of Water, which won Best Picture, which effectively is just a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie.
Yeah.
And I love that movie, by the way. So I'm not ill talking it. I think it was worthy of its awards, but like, I don't get how he didn't take that win and then really leverage it for Hellboy 3, because that's like his number one passion project. And that kind of sucks. But going to the 2019 Hellboy movie, I do think that there was an active movement to shit on the film. Would you agree?
Of course, man. It's the internet. Just a side note, I feel that Hellboy 2, The Golden Army, I believe it's called, was its box office got stumped a bit by The Dark Knight, because The Dark Knight was actually, although it was officially released on July 18th, it was released a bit earlier than that, with special sneak previews, and so I think that really worked in on the cutting the profit. And when Guillermo del Toro was asking for a large amount of money, I believe, to come back for the third film. So I I kind of heard that as well. But David Harbour here, he looks great in the part. He was having a lot of fun, and he didn't deserve, this kind of backlash, honestly.
No, I think I think like again, remaking some of those properties. We're in an age right now where people don't want remakes, right? I mean, Ghostbusters 2016 is a prime example of this, where people didn't want the remake. The movie was bad, so the studio went back and did a third film, which is the right call. And now we have to wait a little bit longer, probably, in order to be able to see it this year. But and I get that. And then there's also, let's say, RoboCop from 2014, where nobody really wanted a reboot of RoboCop. If anything, they would just want something that isn't RoboCop 3, but still starring, Frank Weller, right?
Yeah.
And I would want that too. I love RoboCop 1 and RoboCop 2. But again, time and money and everything else, and rights change hands, and that is unfortunately just part of the business world. Hellboy, I really do think, would have been better as a Netflix series or a streaming series rather than a movie. But the biggest issue with that film in my mind is that they took too much story and they crammed it into the movie, because they crammed like 3 storylines or 3 comic lines into that, right? They had like the Wild Hunt for a little bit of it, in the middle of the movie, and then they did something else towards the end, and another thing here, another thing there. And I also think that it corresponding to right around the same time that that the guy who created Mike Mignola was ending the Hellboy line. He was ending the BPRD, right? He was getting, he was finishing it up right around the same time. I just don't think there was faith in the comic. So if there's no faith in the comic property, if you're closing up shop right around the same time this new movie is coming out, that's kind of meant to give rebirth to this character and launch a new franchise, it doesn't really show the most synergy, right?
Yeah, momentum was definitely not on the side. Although David Harbour was, Stranger Things is huge, so I guess they were expecting to get the Stranger Things fans to head over to watch Hellboy.
Yeah, and that was the thing with that too, is they should have they didn't play that up enough, in my opinion, because I went and saw Hellboy on opening night, and I was cautiously optimistic, and I went in and I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to expect here. I love the Ron Perlman Guillermo movies, I do, and I'm really anxious to see how this one plays out. And while it does have its flaws, I've also been a Neil Marshall fan for many, many, many years. And I want to see him direct more. And so him getting the opportunity to direct this, I was looking forward to that kind of like pulpy take on it, right? And what we got was like, yeah, it was a bit of a mishmash. There was a lot of problems behind the scenes. The producers and the director were butting heads. And I think that did cause a bit of the problem for what we got. But man, that Baba Yaga stuff, that was tight.
Yeah, I remember it had some great VFX.
Yeah, it did. It really had some good effects for like the lowered budget.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, unfortunately, it just did not do well. It just came out, it died.
When you initially read the headlines, I was like, oh, here we go. He's gonna blame. I kind of thought a little bit. I hope he doesn't blame the fans or the for not going or whatever, the internet backlash. But he didn't. He was very aware of what the situation was, that Hellboy, the Guillermo Del Toro versions are beloved, and what he was going up against. And he sounds like a real humble guy, and I think I'm a bigger fan after you read that article.
Yeah, I mean, I like David Harbour quite a bit. Like he's actually one of the, him in Black Widow is actually one of the reasons why I'm really excited.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we know that Hopper's still around in Stranger Things 4, so that's going to be great too. And yeah, but I really think like I was really hoping that Hellboy would find a home, and I don't know if it has found an audience. I mean, I see in the comment section people like, oh, it's terrible, there's no defending it. I'm like, no, like that Baba Yaga scene, with those 2 scenes of Baba Yaga, they earned that shit. That was good. That was really solid. And then I liked Mila Jovovich in it. I liked the world it built. I wanted to see more, but I do feel that at the same time, they could have turned that into something that was like a streaming show. And I think it would have done a bit better, because they would have had more time to flesh everything out. And that's always the problem when you're trying to do these movies, is that they never get fleshed out well enough. You never get the full story because they're trying to cram everything into 2 hours or 90 minutes. Like, look at Justice League. Again, I'm the Snyder Cut thing, but the reason why I bring it up is because the head of Warner Brothers was like, 2 hour hard cut. That's it. A hard limit at 2 hours, nothing more.
That's bizarre, because I think the order should have been, look, approximately 2 hours, but to say 2 hour hard cut, what the hell is that about? That's weird. And it was right on the hour, right?
It was really close. It was like, there's a thing there. So they didn't have, it's hard to do that with comic books and all the lore and all the story and getting it all out there. Now there are, the couple different Hellboy animated films that they did that were really good, and those were voiced by Ron Perlman and Doug Jones. And I think they were produced by Guillermo as well. And that could be something. If they want to do number 3, they should animate it and get Ron Perlman and Selma Blair and everybody to come back and just voice the characters.
It's a tough situation now. Guillermo Del Toro produced Antlers, and that is on permanent hold. I had a chance to see the film already, so I think he's moved on to things. He has the Academy Award and everything, so he's going to be way too expensive for a studio to risk.
True, but but then again, he's also created animated stuff with Netflix, right? Yeah, he could. He did the Tales from Arcadia, which, if you haven't seen those are actually really, really, really good. It's like a solid show. It was Anton Yelchin's last project before he'd recorded the voice for it before he died, and stuff. And they did a couple different series. So again, he's done animated projects. Ron Perlman was like the villain in the first, I think, half of the Tales from Arcadia show. Mark Hamill popped up as a villain in part 2. So it's like, he can get these voice actors, and I think deep down he probably wants to do it. But you have a point. He's got a lot. He's working on that Nightmare Alley right now. He's actively working on a ton of other projects. And I think after the Hellboy debacle and after the Lord of the Rings debacle, trying to get the Hobbit off the ground, and all the problems with that, he probably just wants to go do his own thing.
He calls the shots now.
Yeah,
he's an Academy Award winning actor. Period. He's a kind of guy. He's very creative. So for him to go to what was he? A suit. That's a term for it. A studio suit, which is like the corporate producers or whatever, with an idea. Like Guillermo del Toro, picture him with one of his ideas, how he thinks outside of the box, and asking for a studio to invest in his stuff, or the suit to invest in his stuff. It's probably going to get told no 90% of the time. But now, since he has that Oscar, he calls the shots. And so Guillermo del Toro's probably moved on to things. Lionsgate owns Hellboy, from what I understand.
Universal had the right. Well, it was New Line with Hellboy 1, and then Hellboy 2 was Universal, and then Hellboy, this was Lionsgate. It's just, I think whoever has the rights right now, they are the ones who have, they're going to license it out to a studio. But at the end of the day, I think, as much as I would love to see another Hellboy with David Harbour, it's probably not going to happen. And I think if anything, finish it out with an animated film. That way you at least please the audience, and then maybe down the road we can reboot it without having that looming over everyone's heads.
Amen.
Okay.